Eli had always been a quiet kind of man, the sort who kept to himself and rarely spoke unless someone asked him a direct question. People in town said he was a good worker, honest and decent, but also painfully shy. He had grown up on the same little ranch his father left him. A place made of weathered boards, a tin roof, a small barn, and a stretch of land that looked bigger than it really was, because he lived there alone. His days followed the same pattern. Wake up before dawn, feed the cattle, check the fences, mend whatever needed fixing, and ride into town once every 2 weeks for supplies. Nothing in his life changed much. Maybe that was why people whispered that he might live out his whole life without a family. But life has a way of surprising even the most careful man. One warm afternoon, as Eli returned from the far edge of his property, he saw dust clouds rising from the road. He stopped his horse, narrowed his eyes, and waited. A wagon was approaching, and he recognized it from the last time he visited town. It belonged to a traveling family people who wandered from place to place doing small jobs, selling handmade goods, and helping with work in exchange for food and shelter. They were known to be decent folk who kept to themselves. Eli felt his heart beat faster when he remembered something the shopkeeper had told him just days earlier. The family had mentioned they were arranging a marriage for their daughter with a rancher in the valley. Who that rancher was, nobody knew. But now, seeing them head straight toward his home, Eli had a strange feeling they weren't looking for directions. They were looking for him. The wagon came to a stop, and the father stepped down first, followed by the mother. Then the daughter rose from the wagon, and Eli almost forgot how to breathe. Lena was unlike anyone he had ever seen. She was tall, much taller than him, and strong-looking in a natural, comfortable way. Her shoulders were broad, her arms toned from years of hard work, and her posture calm and firm at the same time. She had long dark hair tied in a braid, and her face was soft, gentle, yet confident. She didn't look scared or uncertain. Instead, she looked prepared for anything life put in front of her. Her parents introduced her proudly. They explained their family's situation, the challenges of constant travel, and how Lena wanted a stable life. She wanted a home that didn't move every month. They had asked around town about good men, and Eli's name came up again and again. Quiet, honest, hard-working, that was all Lena was looking for. Eli was stunned. He barely knew how to respond. His hands felt cold, and he kept rubbing them against his trousers without realizing it. He had never imagined someone would want to marry him this quickly or at all. He tried to look polite, but inside he felt an enormous wave of nerves, almost fear. Lena noticed, of course. She seemed to read people easily. Her father asked if Eli would consider the marriage. He didn't pressure him, didn't beg, didn't try to sell the idea. He simply said Lena wanted a peaceful life, and Eli seemed like a man who could offer that. Lena stood silently beside them, waiting for Eli's answer. Without pushing him, Eli swallowed hard, unable to look straight at her for long. He didn't know how to say yes or no. He only knew one thing: she deserved someone confident. Someone who could talk without trembling. Someone who didn't feel his heart stumble just from looking at her. But he also saw something in her eyes that made him pause. She wasn't judging him. She wasn't comparing him to anyone. She was simply waiting. After a long moment, Eli nodded slowly. The decision was made. Her parents smiled in relief and thanked him. The wedding happened the next day right there at the ranch. It was simple, a blessing, a few kind words, and a quiet promise. No crowd, no music, no celebration. Just a new husband and wife standing under the open sky. After the family left, Lena walked around the ranch, touching the fences, looking inside the barn, and admiring the way Eli kept everything clean. She said softly that she liked the place, that it felt real, honest, and peaceful. Eli tried to smile, but his nerves were still twisting inside him. He wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of failing her. As evening settled, Eli prepared supper. He moved awkwardly around the small kitchen space, feeling watched, even when Lena wasn't looking. His hands shook slightly when he served the food, though he tried to hide it. Lena saw everything but chose not to comment. She simply thanked him and ate quietly, showing him she appreciated the effort. After supper, they sat by the small fire outside the cabin. Coyotes howled far in the distance. The sky was wide and painted with stars. They sat side by side, but not too close, both unsure of the next moment. Eli kept avoiding her eyes, and every time she looked at him, he felt his breath catch. Finally, Lena asked him a simple question. "Are you all right?" Her voice wasn't sharp or demanding, it was warm. He nodded, but his nod looked more like a frightened flinch. She waited a few seconds, then asked again, "Are you truly all right?" This time, Eli answered honestly. He admitted he wasn't used to company. He said he had lived alone for a long time and didn't know what husbands were supposed to do. Lena listened with a calm, steady face. He expected her to laugh or tease him gently, but she didn't. Instead, she said something completely unexpected. "I didn't come here to judge you," she said. "I came here so we both could have a home." The words softened something inside him. Maybe she understood more than he thought. Night approached slowly. They walked back to the cabin, the air cool and quiet. Eli opened the door and stepped aside so she could enter first. His heart thumped loudly inside his chest. The small cabin suddenly felt even smaller with both of them inside. The space between them felt heavy with silence. Eli stood near the table, unsure what to say or do. Lena watched him for a long moment, long enough for him to feel her gaze on his back. He turned slowly, his face flushed with nerves. She stepped closer, but not too close. She didn't want to frighten him. Instead, she spoke gently, almost whispering, "Eli, this isn't enough for me." The words fell hard on his heart, but not because they were cruel. Her voice had no anger, no disappointment, only honesty. He realized she wasn't talking about things, or work, or comfort. She was talking about connection, real connection. She wanted trust, closeness, and a bond that felt alive. Not a house where two strangers lived side by side. Eli stared at her, feeling small, weak, unsure. He lowered his head and murmured that he didn't know how to be close to someone. He didn't know how to talk or what to say. He didn't know how to stop shaking when she stood near him. Lena took a slow breath. She didn't step closer or raise her voice. She simply said, "I don't want you to pretend. I just want you to try." Those words felt like a hand reaching into the quiet, lonely part of him. The lantern flickered softly, throwing warm light across the room. Eli felt something break inside, not in a painful way, but like a wall finally cracking. He didn't speak again. He couldn't. He just nodded, his eyes slightly wet though he tried to hide it. Lena didn't push further. She didn't expect a sudden change or bold action. She simply walked to the bed, sat down quietly, and waited for him to calm himself. The silence wasn't heavy now. It felt gentle, like a moment that could lead somewhere new, if neither of them ran from it. Eli moved slowly, sitting on the other side of the room at first, needing time to breathe. His heart still pounded, but not with fear, now more with hope he didn't yet understand. The night stretched on, calm and slow. Two strangers, newly bound by marriage, sat in the same small cabin, both wondering how to build something real. Lena's words echoed again in his mind. "This isn't enough for me, not as a complaint but as an invitation. An invitation to grow, an invitation to trust, an invitation to begin something neither had ever known." And that quiet, fragile beginning was the first step in changing both their lives. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, turning the fields into soft gold. Birds chirped in the distance, and the light breeze carried the smell of dry grass. Eli was already outside when Lena woke up. He had slipped out quietly before dawn, hoping to calm his thoughts with work. He was feeding the cattle when she stepped out of the cabin, rubbing her eyes and looking around as if trying to understand this new life she had stepped into. Eli pretended not to notice her at first. His hands moved fast, tossing feed, checking buckets, adjusting ropes, anything to keep busy. But Lena had sharp eyes. She saw how he kept his shoulders stiff, how he avoided looking in her direction, how he forced himself to stay focused, even though his mind was clearly somewhere else. She didn't blame him. Last night had been heavy for both of them. With calm steps, Lena walked toward him, stopping at a reasonable distance so he wouldn't feel cornered. She simply said, "Good morning," in a quiet voice. Eli answered with a small nod, barely looking at her. She could tell he wanted to be polite but was still wrapped in worry. Instead of forcing conversation, she bent down and began helping him with the work scooping feed, checking the water troughs, and brushing one of the calmer horses. Her hands were strong, and she moved with a natural confidence. Eli glanced at her a few times, surprised by how comfortable she looked doing all this. He had expected a newly arrived bride to be confused or slow to adjust. But Lena worked as if she had lived there for years. After a while, Lena wiped her hands and said softly, "Walk with me for a bit." She didn't command or request strongly. It was simply an invitation. Eli hesitated, but finally nodded. They walked toward the old tree near the center of the property. The grass brushed their boots as they moved. Eli kept his eyes down. Lena stared ahead, thinking of the right words. When they reached the shade, she turned to him and spoke gently. "Eli, I want to explain what I said last night. You looked scared. That wasn't my goal." He shifted awkwardly. "It's all right if you were," she replied, her voice soft as warm cloth. "You don't have to hide that from me." The honesty in her tone made his chest tighten again. He didn't want to look weak in front of her, but he also didn't want to lie. I don't know how to be what you need," he admitted. Lena took a slow breath and then sat on a fallen log. She gestured for him to sit too. After a long pause, she began telling him about her life. She told him how she had always been the tallest child in her family, always the strongest, always the one asked to lift, carry, fix, and protect. People admired her strength, but they didn't always see her feelings. They assumed she didn't need comfort, didn't need gentleness, didn't need someone to look after her. She explained how tiring that was, how much she longed for someone who cared about her heart, not just her strength. Eli listened without interrupting. Every word she said painted a clearer picture of her, someone who looked strong on the outside but carried quiet hopes inside. Then she turned to look at him fully. "I didn't say this isn't enough for me, because I expect something big from you," she said. "I said it because I want a life with real connection. I want someone who talks to me, who lets me in, who doesn't hide behind silence." Eli felt her words settle deep inside him. They didn't hurt. They didn't accuse. They simply spoke truth. He swallowed, and finally said something that had been trapped inside him for years. "I'm not used to talking, or sharing, or being close to anyone. I don't want to fail you." Lena smiled gently. "You won't fail me by being honest. You only fail me if you close yourself off completely." That made something warm rise in his chest. For the first time, he felt like she saw him not just as a quiet rancher, not just as a man unsure of himself, but as someone capable of growing if he tried. They spent a long time under the tree, talking more than Eli had talked in months. Lena asked simple questions. He gave simple answers. And each time he spoke, he felt a small weight lift off his shoulders. When they walked back to the ranch, the silence between them was different, gentler, softer, almost hopeful. The rest of the day passed with them working together. Eli showed her how to mix the feed for the cattle and which gates needed 2 hands to open. Lena learned quickly and asked questions at the right moments. Sometimes, she laughed softly when she liked something, he explained. Each time she laughed, a tiny spark of ease entered Eli's chest. Later, Eli showed her the barn tools and how he used them. Lena touched the wooden handles and inspected the ropes, impressed with how neatly he kept everything. She told him she liked his way of organizing things, and his face warmed at the compliment. That afternoon, the sun was high when Lena pushed a loose board back into place on the fence. Eli blinked in surprise as she hammered it down with quick, skilled motions. She worked with confidence, strength, and steady hands. It impressed him, but it also made him wonder if she had spent years doing the hardest work while others depended on her too much. He found himself wanting to protect her from that kind of life, even if she was stronger than him physically. As evening approached, the sky slowly shifted to deep orange. They cleaned up and walked back to the cabin. Lena wrapped a cloth around her hands, brushing off dust. Eli boiled beans for supper. They ate quietly, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable silence. It was gentle. After eating, Lena spoke again. Eli, I don't want to rush things, but I want us to build trust, step by step. He nodded, grateful for her patience. And I want you to tell me when something scares you or confuses you, she added. Eli looked down at his hands. I'm afraid of disappointing you. You won't, she said firmly. Not if you try. Not if you stay honest. He felt something inside him soften again. It was strange, almost painful in a sweet way, like his heart was waking up. When the sun finally set, they stepped out to watch the horizon fade into purple and blue. Eli stood near her, close enough to feel her presence, but not close enough to touch. He didn't know how to reach out, didn't know what was allowed or expected, but something inside him urged him to move just a little closer. In a quiet moment of courage, he reached out and gently touched her hand. Lena didn't pull away. She didn't squeeze back too strongly. She simply turned her palm slightly, so his fingers rested comfortably against hers. The simple contact felt like a new beginning. They stood like that as the stars appeared above them. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The breeze brushed against their faces, carrying the soft smell of the evening grass, and Eli felt a kind of peace he had never known. Later, when they returned inside, Eli didn't feel the same fear as the night before. The cabin was still small, the silence still big, but now it had a warmer feeling, not like 2 strangers trapped together, but like 2 people learning slowly how to share a life. Lena sat on the bed, and Eli stood nearby, unsure what to do next. She looked at him gently and said, "We don't have to rush. We just have to keep moving forward." He nodded silently. Those simple words felt like a promise he could keep. That night, they rested quietly close enough to know they weren't alone, far enough to give each other space. But something had changed permanently. The fear that filled Eli the night before had loosened its grip. Lena's kindness, her patience, her honesty, they had already begun to guide him out of his shell. As he slowly drifted off to sleep, he thought about her words again. This isn't enough for me. Now he understood more clearly. She wasn't asking for perfection. She wasn't asking for strength he didn't have. She was asking for something real, something he now realized he wanted too. And that made all the difference. The days after their quiet moment under the stars moved slowly but gently, like the beginning of a calm season. Eli woke each morning, feeling a little less alone. Lena moved around the ranch with growing comfort, as if she had always belonged there. She learned the routine, the timings, the sounds of the land, and even the moods of the animals. Eli watched her carefully, not in a nervous way anymore, but with quiet admiration. Lena was like a strong tree planted deep in the earth. She never complained about hard work, never showed fear, never hesitated when something needed to be done. Yet Eli began to notice small details he had missed earlier. When she worked too long in the sun, she rubbed the back of her neck. When a memory bothered her, she would pause mid-task and stare at the ground quietly. When she sat by the fire in the evening, her breath would slow, as if she was wrestling with thoughts she couldn't speak aloud. He saw these things because he was finally paying attention, not just looking, but truly seeing her. One afternoon, Lena was in the barn organizing tools when she found an old, heavy mallet lying under a broken shelf. She lifted it easily with one hand and called out, "Eli, do you want to fix this? Or should I?" Eli hurried over, brushing dust off his hands. They worked together, holding the wooden frame steady, while Eli hammered the nails back into place. Their fingers brushed a few times, and each time, Eli felt a warm spark crawl up his arm. Lena didn't tease him or react strongly. Instead, she smiled gently, letting him know it was fine to feel nervous. Fine to take things slow. Fine to learn how to be close. When the shelf was fixed, Eli stepped back and let out a breath. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "So are you," Lena replied. Her words were simple, but they meant more to him than she knew. The next morning, clouds gathered early, thick and dark, warning of an approaching storm. Eli looked at the sky. Uneasy. "Looks like a bad one," he said. Lena stepped beside him and nodded. "We should bring everything inside." Together, they rushed to move hay bales, cover equipment, and bring the horses into the barn. The wind picked up quickly, whipping Lena's braid and pushing against Eli's small frame. Just before the storm fully hit, Eli saw a gate swinging wildly in the wind, threatening to break off entirely. "I need to close that," he shouted over the rising howl of the wind. Lena grabbed his arm. "It's dangerous, wait." But Eli shook his head. "If it breaks, the animals could get hurt." Before she could stop him, he ran toward the gate. Mud splashed under his boots, and the wind pushed him sideways. The gate slammed back and forth like a furious beast. Eli tried to grab it, but the wet ground made him slip. His foot slid out from under him, and he fell toward a fence post. Before he hit the ground, a strong hand grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled him upright in one sweeping motion. Lena had sprinted across the mud faster than he expected. She held him firmly with both hands, steadying him as the wind shoved against them. "Eli, don't do that again," she said, her voice loud but full of worry. He steadied himself, breathing hard. I just didn't want it to break." "I know," she said gently, "but you could have been hurt." She held him for a moment longer, making sure he was fully stable before letting go. When she finally released him, he wasn't sure if the warm feeling in his chest came from the fear, the close call, or the way she looked at him with unmistakable concern. Together, they forced the gate closed, fighting against the wind until it latched. Then, they hurried to the barn, where the animals were restless. The storm roared outside, with thunder rolling across the sky like heavy drums. Rain slammed against the roof, and the sound echoed through the wooden walls. Eli and Lena sat near the horses, comforting them. Lightning flashed brightly, followed by a loud crack. One horse panicked, rearing slightly, but Lena stepped forward, placed her hand on its neck, and whispered softly until it calmed down. Her voice was steady and warm, and Eli watched her carefully. She didn't fear the storm. She was grounding everything around her, including him. Eventually, the worst of the storm passed. The thunder moved farther away, and the rain softened. Eli felt embarrassed for rushing toward the gate earlier. He sat on a wooden crate, staring at the muddy floor. Lena sat beside him quietly. "You scared me," she said softly. He kept his eyes down. "I wasn't thinking." She reached out and touched his arm gently. "You were thinking like someone who cares. Just don't forget that your safety matters too." Her touch was light, but it felt like warmth spreading through his chest. When they returned to the cabin after checking everything outside, the firewood was damp, and Eli struggled to get a flame going. Lena knelt beside him, helping arrange the sticks. Their hands brushed again, and this time, Eli didn't pull away. He let the moment linger. When the fire finally lit, they sat near it, both tired from the long day. The storm had shaken the ranch, and Eli felt shaken inside too, but in a different way. Something about almost slipping. Something about her catching him. Something about the way she looked at him. It had cracked open a new understanding between them. The flames flickered softly, warming the room. Lena sat comfortably beside him. Her long legs stretched out, her shoulders relaxed. Eli glanced at her, studying her profile. She looked calm now, almost peaceful. But he remembered the intensity in her eyes when she grabbed him earlier. No one had looked at him with that kind of concern before. Slowly, Eli spoke. "Lena, I want to try harder." She turned to him, her expression open and attentive. "Try at what?" "At being closer. Talking more. Not hiding all the time." Her eyes softened. "You're already doing that." He shook his head. "Not enough." She leaned back slightly, her voice gentle. "Eli, closeness doesn't come from big actions. It grows from small steps. Like today." He looked at her in confusion. "You ran into danger to protect the animals. I caught you because I couldn't let you fall. Then we worked together until everything was safe. That's what closeness looks like. Worrying, helping, listening, caring." He let her words sink in slowly. Then he whispered a truth he had never shared with anyone. "I'm not used to people caring." Lena's expression softened even more. "Then let's change that. One day at a time." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, with a courage he didn't know he had, he moved a little closer to her. Just a few inches, but enough to show he was trying. Lena didn't move away. She stayed right where she was, steady and grounded. They talked late into the evening about small things, about memories, about what they hoped the ranch would become. Eli opened up slowly, like a door he had kept locked for years, finally creaking open. Lena listened to him with patience, never rushing him, never pushing for more than he could give. The fire crackled softly. Outside, raindrops tapped gently on the roof. Inside, something warm and steady settled between them. Eli realized he trusted her. That was new. That was important. And Lena realized Eli was finally letting her in. That meant everything to her. Before they went to sleep, Lena spoke softly. "Eli, the first night, I told you something wasn't enough. But now I see something is growing. Something real." He nodded quietly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. That night, they rested again in the same small cabin. But the distance between them felt different, smaller, softer, safer. They weren't just two people learning how to be married. They were two hearts learning how to meet in the middle. The storm outside had tested the ranch, but the storm inside Eli had finally begun to settle, and the bond between them was stronger than before. The storm had passed, but its memory stayed in the air for days. The ground remained soft, the grass smelled fresher, and the sky looked cleaner than usual. For Eli and Lena, the storm had done more than shake the ranch. It had washed away the last big wall between them. Now, each morning felt different. Each moment carried a quiet closeness they didn't speak about but both felt deeply. Eli woke early as always, but now he found himself listening for Lena's footsteps. He liked the soft sound of her walking from the cabin to join him outside. She liked seeing him start the day with quiet energy, his hands already full of chores, his mind already moving. They didn't have to talk much at first. Their silence had become comfortable. But whenever their eyes met, something gentle passed between them, something warm and unspoken. One morning, Lena brought him a wooden cup of warm water, something she had heated on the stove. She handed it to him without a word. Eli blinked, surprised. No one had ever done such a small, thoughtful thing for him before. He held the cup carefully, as if he might drop it. "Thank you," he said softly. Lena nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You work hard. You deserve something warm to start your day." Her simple kindness melted something inside him. He didn't say more, but he carried the warmth of the cup with him long after he finished drinking. Later that day, they worked side by side, fixing the fence posts the storm had loosened. Lena held the posts steady while Eli hammered. Sometimes he missed the nail and felt embarrassed. But Lena just smiled and steadied the board again. She didn't make him feel small or clumsy. She never once mocked his nervousness or his slow movements. Instead, she watched him with a kind of patience that felt like sunlight. When they reached the final post, Eli wiped sweat from his forehead and stepped back to look at the work they had done. Lena stood next to him, her big hands resting on her hips, her face glowing with effort and pride. "We did a good job," she said. "We make a good team," Eli replied quietly. Lena turned to him. "Yes, we really do." Her voice carried a softness that touched him deeply. As the days passed, their routine changed naturally. It wasn't something they discussed, it simply happened. Eli began showing her how to check for weak spots in the fences, how to read the behavior of the cattle, how to know when the roof needed patching. Lena taught him things too: how to tie stronger knots, how to lift heavy boards without hurting his back, how to calm a frightened horse with gentle firmness. They shared skills, shared work, shared the small rhythms of life. But something else grew too quiet: moments of connection. One afternoon, Lena was cleaning the tools when she accidentally dropped one, and the loud clang startled her. Eli rushed over instinctively, asking if she was all right. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "It's just a tool, Eli. I'm fine." But he saw the brief flicker of embarrassment in her eyes and recognized it. Strong people also had moments where they felt fragile. He placed a gentle hand on her arm and said, "Everyone drops things sometimes. Doesn't mean anything." Lena looked at his hand, then at his face, and something quiet bloomed between them, as if she realized he understood her more than she thought. That evening, they cooked together. Something they hadn't done before. Eli chopped vegetables while Lena stirred the pot. She hummed a soft tune from her childhood, something peaceful and earthy. Eli listened quietly, feeling strangely comforted by the melody. When he burned his hand slightly by touching a hot pot, Lena quickly grabbed his wrist and dipped his hand in cool water. The moment was small but strangely intimate. Eli felt her steady fingers wrapped around his hand and didn't want to pull away. "You have to be careful," she said softly. "I'll try," he replied. And their eyes held longer than either expected. After supper, they stepped outside to watch the sunset, a habit they had naturally developed. The sky was painted with gentle orange and pink, fading into purple at the edges. Lena crossed her arms and breathed deeply, enjoying the cool breeze brushing across her face. Eli stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, feeling strangely brave. He turned slightly toward her and said, "I'm glad you came here." Lena blinked in surprise. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she looked at him with gentle eyes. "I'm glad too," she said. "I didn't know what to expect. But I found something better than I hoped." Eli felt his heart jump at her words. "Better?" he echoed in disbelief. "Yes," she said simply. "A home." Eli's throat tightened with emotion he didn't fully understand. He lowered his eyes, suddenly shy. But Lena reached out and lightly touched his shoulder. He felt the warmth of her hand through his shirt, felt her strength and softness at the same time. She didn't grip him tightly, just rested her hand there, steady and warm. It was enough to make him look up again. Over the next week, Eli found himself opening up more. He told her about his father, how quiet he had been, how he taught Eli everything by example, not words. He told her about the winter he got sick and thought he might not survive. He told her about the loneliness that felt like a heavy blanket every night. Lena listened with deep care, sometimes nodding, sometimes placing a hand on his arm, sometimes just sitting quietly near him so he didn't feel alone. In return, Lena shared stories too. She told him how hard it was to always be the strong one in her family, how people expected her to never get tired, never feel sad, never break. She told him she wanted a place where she could rest, where she didn't have to be the one holding everything up all the time. Eli listened with gentle eyes and understood more than she expected. One evening, they were fixing the barn door when Lena's hand slipped, and she accidentally scraped her knuckles against a sharp nail. Blood appeared instantly. Eli's heart jumped in panic. He hurried to her side, holding her hand carefully, inspecting the cut. It wasn't deep, but it looked painful. "Sit down," he said quietly but firmly. Lena raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Eli, it's nothing." "Sit," he repeated, his voice still soft but unmistakably serious. She blinked in surprise again, then obeyed him. He cleaned her wound with warm water, using a cloth as gently as he could. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the closeness, from the care he felt for her. Lena watched him silently, touched by the attention. No one had taken care of her wounds in years. She always did it herself. "Thank you," she whispered when he finished. "I don't want you hurt," he replied. Those words made her heart soften. They felt simple, but they carried an honesty she had longed for. Days passed into weeks. Their bond no longer felt fragile or uncertain. It felt steady, like the slow growth of a strong tree. They shared meals, work, quiet moments, small touches, and growing trust. Eli didn't tremble anymore when she stood close. Lena didn't fear losing herself in the marriage. They had found balance. They had found peace. One evening, the sky burned with deep gold at sunset. Lena and Eli stood outside, side by side. The air felt warm and calm. Lena took a slow breath and said, "Eli, do you remember the first night, when I said something wasn't enough?" He nodded slowly. "I said that because I didn't want our life to be empty. I wanted a real bond." "And now?" he asked softly. She smiled at him, a warm, slow smile that reached her eyes. "Now, I feel that bond growing every day." Eli's heart swelled with relief and happiness. He stepped a little closer, closer than he had dared, before letting their shoulders touch. Lena didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned just slightly into him, allowing her weight to rest comfortably against his side. Nothing rushed, nothing forced.